Welcome to Resilient Minds 365, where we discuss the resilient stories of entrepreneurs, professionals, and students with mental illnesses to encourage you to strive, thrive, and live in abundance. I'm your host, Cleone Crawford. Welcome to Resilient Minds 365, where we discuss the resilient stories of entrepreneurs, professionals, and students with mental illnesses to encourage you to strive, thrive, and live in abundance. I'm your host, Cleone Crawford. Well, guys, welcome back. Welcome back. We have a special guest with us today. We have Dr. Shahana Alibhai, who is a TEDx speaker, a family physician, and a mental health advocate. As the medical lead at one of British Columbia's largest youth health centers, much of Dr. Shahana's career is focused on those struggling with their mental health. Her insights are highly sought after, and she has been featured in multiple major media, including CTV and Global. Dr. Shahana has been privileged to work with the New York Times bestselling author Adrian Gostick in order to publish her own book, Feel Better. Pre-sales starts September 2024, and most recently, her book was endorsed by Mel Robbins herself. So, with that said, I now present to you Dr. Shahana. Dr. Shahana, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to have this conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So tell us a little bit more about your profession, how you got started, why, what you do, and just break it down for us.
Yeah, no, of course. It was so funny growing up. I think like the prototypical story of having immigrant parents, I really was only given a couple of options, right? It was you can be an engineer, you can be a lawyer, you can be a pharmacist. And ironically enough, my dad's a pharmacist, my sister's a pharmacist. So medicine was actually falling by the wayside. It was, you're going to be a pharmacist. This is what you're going to do. And I remember the night of what was called the PCAT, or the pharmacy application. I didn't hand it in. And it was the first rebellious act I had ever done, like the first thing. And I was in my 20s. And I remember telling my dad that I don't want to be a pharmacist. I want to go to kinesiology or exercise science. And he looked back at me. He's like, you're going to do bicep curls for the rest of your life? Like, is this going to be a thing? Like, this is what you're going to do now? So he was just like, I guess, trying to reconcile everything that he had instilled in me with my decision. And I went with it. I had an injury when I was growing up. It was just a very mild running injury, but I remember going to a physiotherapist, not needing medication, and being able to heal myself through exercise. And that seems like a benign concept right now, but when you're young, I thought that's really cool that exercise could heal my body. So what else could it do? So I was fascinated with exercise science. Although when you go into a program like that, you are met with people who might physically look like they belong in an exercise science program. Maybe not someone like me who's barely 5'1", trying to keep up with all of them too. So it was through that learned a lot more about the human body, learned that I put myself through undergraduate by being a fitness instructor. I wasn't one for sports. Just never was my thing. But standing in a fitness class, the old days of step aerobics, I felt like this was my tribe. Like I loved it. And I began teaching step aerobics and teaching fitness classes. All of that to say, after the end of my undergraduate, still had the same decision. Well, now what are you going to do? And I remember thinking to myself, if I ever did medicine, I hope I can keep the spark of preventative medicine alive. Because somehow throughout the 4, 6, 10 years of education, that light dimmers, right? That light becomes a lot harder to accept because you're so focused on disease. And I thought to myself, if I can just keep that afloat, then I can be true to myself. And somehow at the end of it, mental health and preventing mental health, or working upstream of mental health, i.e., through emotional health, has become my form of expressing that.
Cool. Interesting. Cool. Okay. Awesome. So, what was my next question? My next question is, now that I know a little bit more about what you do, so you've been doing this for, I guess, for how many years now?
Yeah, so I graduated from residency in 2014. So 10 years out in practice, although I still feel like sometimes like a new grad. I don't think, I'm not sure if you ever get over that feeling. 3 pregnancies in between, so 3 young boys. And now, like you talked about at the top of the show, medical director of our largest youth health center. So really focusing on youth between the ages of 12 and 24. So when you see youth, we see everything. It's not just mental health. It's anything from an ingrown toenail to a headache and everything in between. But mental health does rise to the surface as one of the more prevalent issues that we talk about. And having walked the walk and gone through the struggle myself, I am now not just seeing a youth at an arm's length, like you're over here and I'm up here sort of thing. I
Mhm.
really get the language that they're speaking. I understand because I've been there. I've been on the other side of the couch, so to say.
Yes, definitely, definitely. That's amazing. I
Mm.
mean, working with youth is very rewarding and has its challenges as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, it's very rewarding. I love it. I love it. Okay, so now that we know what you do, I'd like to know a little. We're going to switch the interview to talk about the mental health part of this interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is your mental health diagnosis and when were you diagnosed?
Yeah. It's so refreshing to be on a podcast where I don't need to sneak this into the conversation or also feel protected because I'm not going to talk about this. But to have that question asked openly is just shows I think we're in a place where you can actually say, my mental health diagnosis is, and it's a form of OCD. It's pure OCD or pure O OCD. So I had these symptoms ever since the age of 4 or 5. This is now 30 years ago. So nobody knew what pure O OCD was. It's a subtype of OCD where you don't have the compulsions. You're not checking locks. You're not washing your hands 52 times. You're not organizing things. Nothing to the external eye looks abnormal. All that is quote unquote abnormal or distressing is a better word for the patient, for myself, are these horrible intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts that you clearly don't want to have, but it's very analogous to don't think of a purple elephant and you think of the purple elephant more and more and more. Everybody has intrusive thoughts. Like that's everybody does. It's people with pure OCD that those thoughts are much stickier. Those are much harder to get rid of and they start to affect their quality of life. Like that's the difference. Is people might have a weird thought now and again and more often now than again, but they don't really think about it too much. They're like, "Oh, that's weird," and they continue on with their day. Those with pure OCD, they're paralyzed by those thoughts. They change their behaviors, they change their actions, they start to avoid certain things. So when I was young, I didn't know what this was. I just knew that something didn't feel right and felt very scary. Fast
Mm-hmm.
forward 20 years, so when I was in medical school, a psychiatrist was giving us a plain old lecture on anxiety. And there, like in subtext with an asterisk, was subtype of OCD, pure OCD. And I'm like, I've never heard of that before. Googled it. And I called my fiance, now my husband. I'm going, oh my word, I'm not crazy. Like this is a thing. And that was the moment of reconciliation for me because I think up until that point, I felt other. I felt outside the norm. I felt like I didn't belong. So I was just trying to keep up the act. Now knowing that I wasn't, that's all you want in this whole world. Like that's the bottom denominator is just feeling that you are not alone, that you are connected to something. I always tell my teenage patients that you are as unique as a snowflake. You are just beautiful and unique. But when it comes to your mental health, I don't think anybody wants to be like, oh, like I've never heard of that before. Like you don't want to be the rash of mental illness. Like nobody wants to have a doctor go like, oh, I've never seen that. You're weird. Like you want to feel like you belong. So in that moment, suddenly I felt connected. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I wasn't the only one. And the equation was hope. Because if somebody else had it, it meant that somebody else knew what to do with it. But
Right.
Do you think I did anything with that information? Do you think I like, okay, I'm going to see my doctor, I'm going to get help? Nope, I didn't. Because I'm like, once again, I thought I can just suppress it. I can just work harder. I can work my way out of it. That only lasts for so long until the postpartum time period, when little did I know, pure OCD, even if you don't have a pre-existing diagnosis, is very, very, very common. So women who have had no inkling about OCD, pure OCD, can still develop it after the postpartum period, because that's a very common time period to have it. So of course, if I'm walking in with the pre-existing history, my chances were second to none that it would come find me, which it did. And the most horrible thing about that is the most common types of thoughts moms, parents, and I'll say moms and dads and parents can get is, could I do harm to my child? And no parent wants to feel that way. No parent wants to have those images, thoughts. But with OCD, they keep coming. They keep coming. They keep coming. So what do? You start avoiding your child. You start not wanting to go out with them. You start really feeling like you are a bad mom, and all of your actions start mirroring that as well, right? So, and do you think you're going to go to your partner or your doctor and say, by the way, I'm having these horrible thoughts? Nobody's going to do that. So you suffer in silence. You suffer in shame, and you just start to isolate and block out. And that was the trajectory. Even though I knew exactly what was going on, I refused to believe it for the full first year of my son's life, until it ended up where the only clear thought I could have was it would be better off for me not to be here. And that was my version of rock bottom. That was, okay, like now we're not fooling anybody anymore. You need to do something about this.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Wow. So now that we know that you went through pure OCD, tell us a little bit more about your mental health story of resilience. What did you have to do to overcome, to to kind of deal with the OCD and actually and rise above it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So much, I think, of the facade of mental health is the armor that we wear, right? Is that if I look perfect on the outside, if I act perfect on the inside, if I have the right amount of accolades, then you're not going to suspect anything, right? And I think the joy, the freedom of all of this is to take off the armor. So that was the first step, to go, can I just be who I am? And that's a very scary place to be, because I didn't even know what was going on. I was grappling with the diagnosis. I was grappling with these thoughts. I had to admit to myself that I needed help. And as a professional, as a healthcare professional, as someone who's taken an oath to help others, that is a really, really scary place to be. So
Mhm.
it started with picking up a phone, not calling my own doctor, because I'll be the first to admit it. We were friends. I had too much ego to admit that I could ever be suffering with such a thing. So I called an anonymous physician crisis line, and therein began the journey. Therein began the journey of some stranger on the other end saying, you know, you're going to need to see a psychiatrist, right? And you know, you're going to need to start medication, right? And you probably need to see counseling, right? And it was like, no, no, and no. Like, I'm not doing any of that. And then it became yes, yes, and hell yes, I'll do all of it, because you realize that you need to start somewhere. And I think we always want to paint the picture afterwards, like, you know, everything is fine now. My take on mental health is that there's a waxing and waning component. Maybe in your story, whoever you are and who are listening, it was a beginning, middle, and end. And great that that's your case. I think for myself and for a lot of patients that I see, you have these pools of going up and down, these undulations of mental health. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But I can say for myself, I don't, because this is they've seen loops on functional MRI of people with pure OCD. There's a structural issue in the brain where you just get into these thought loops. So can I say that I'll just outlive it and outgrow it? I probably won't. This is something I need to learn to live with. And
Right.
yes, I have flare-ups. And yes, if you talk to me maybe 2 or 3 months, I might be on my knees crying in my bedroom because I still believe the thoughts and I'm still so disturbed by them. Right now, I can talk to you openly. So it's a very, very humbling process, all of it. And for me, I don't think it will ever go away. I think it's about me having these conversations,
Mhm.
learning to live with it, and more importantly, knowing that when I've been through it enough that there's often hope after a flare, right? It's not, my life has not always been one flare after the other. So when I see these lulls of, okay, things are a little bit okay, I know that when things get bad again, hopefully they will go down again. But now it's all about tools. Do I have the tools? Do I have the people? Do I have the resources? And let's be honest, hiding, secrecy, shame, fear just makes those peaks even higher.
Right, right. Okay. So, what did you have to do to overcome or bounce back from your low points with all the
Yeah,
resources?
yeah. So the lowest point was, what I mentioned of not wanting to be here anymore. That was rock bottom or the basement for me. And I think it just took learning to walk again. It took crawling out of that. It took taking a few very wobbly steps, and it took finding my own 2 feet. But all of that took a lot of vulnerability, and it took a lot of me being okay with my self-concept that this whole idea of perfectionism wasn't serving me anymore because I couldn't keep up this facade anymore. So it's really having to let go of that in order to invite in counselors, medication specialists. And so, guess what? I've tried medications that caused me horrible side effects. Like, we
Mhm.
have this misnomer that the first medication you try, you got it. Like, you asked for help, you got the right medication, things are going to be blissful. I hope that's your story. That's not often the case. Like, this can be a very trying, difficult process as you try medication. Oh, it's not quite there. You also have to realize that typically a medication might not help or solve everything. It can be part of the answer. It might not be 100% of the answer, right? So I think all of that, when you're feeling so low, you just want things to get better faster, right? We're a culture of like, get it fast now, right? So the patience aspect was really hard for me.
Okay, okay. And what are 3 things you wish you had available when you were at your lowest point?
Yeah, I think this is what, when when we had these conversations, I loved this question. I'm actually going to adopt this question for my patients and for the speaking that I do because it really made me reflect. Like, I've never thought about it this way. What I really wanted, I wanted acceptance. I
Yeah.
wanted somebody just to embrace me and go, I've got you. I've got you in all of this messiness, all of this grossness that's coming out of you, what I perceive to be not the other people, but I loathed myself so much. I wanted someone else to say, don't worry, I still love you for who you are. And I found that in my sister, especially. I found that in my husband. I found parts of that in my parents. Um, but that unconditionalness, if that's even a word, right? So I think the 3 things is just acceptance, acceptance, acceptance. Like, you can go into the granularity of like, I wanted to find the right medication. I wanted to find the right counselor, but all of that was secondary to go, can somebody shepherd me through this process? And even if not, can someone accept me and love me for who I am? Because mental health starts to erode your self concept. It really starts to break down who you believe you are in this world. And conditions like, and that's why OCD is no longer categorized in the anxiety disorder. It's categorized in a different disorder, but some of these conditions that really start to mess with your head and just make you start to believe that you're a person that you're not. And that's a very, very vulnerable and scary place to be.
Okay. My next question is, so what words of hope can you give to our listeners? What would you tell to someone who's been in your shoes?
Yeah, I get it. Like, I get it. All of this. And that's the same thing. It looks so easy when I'm sitting here with a nice background, or standing, I should say, and talking eloquently about mental health, and I seem like I have it put together. But like, I was complete. Now I can be really honest. Maybe in a month, it won't feel that way. So know that it waxes and wanes. Know that there's times that things are tough and that times that things will get better. And as you move along this journey, all you can hope is that you start to acquire different tools that you can use at different times. Like I love baking, I love cooking, and I'll often show the kids like, okay, I have this tool that I only need when I'm doing this very one specific task, and it comes out every 3 months, but I still have it. Then there's the measuring cups that I use every single time, right? What are your measuring cups that you need every single time? And what is that one little zester in the back, way in your cupboard that you never need to use, maybe every 6 months or something? So that's what I mean by tools. So, and all of our tools are going to be different. And then hopefully the biggest piece of advice is that you have one other person that can help give you that internal feeling that you're worth it, that you've got this, and that even however messy this process is, that they will help walk alongside of you.
Yeah, love it, love it. Okay, so as you can see behind me, there is a book that says The Music of My Life, to the right of me. And basically that book is about my journey with mental health, bipolar disorder, and music therapy. So my question to you is, what type of music do you like?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you know, and it sounds odd, but I grew up watching I Love Lucy, like 1950s comedies. Like, don't ask me why. It was like, I didn't know there was color TV for the longest time because everything was black and white in our house. It was so in any case, I love 50s music. I really do. I feel like I was born in that era in a different lifetime. So I really, really do enjoy that. There's something about that just brings me happiness. So
Cool, cool. And if you were to think of a song that
yeah.
best describes your journey, what would
Oh,
it be and why?
Bob Marley's song, Everything's Gonna Be All Right. Bob Marley. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
it,
Love
love
it. Yeah. Yeah. So he talks about three little birds, I think, on that, and that's in the song, or there's part of that. And my friend once gave me a necklace with three little birdies because it was like my
it.
kiddos, and then that song, and that whole concept that everything is going to be all right. Because sometimes, let's be honest, it really doesn't feel like it. That you
Yeah,
need to hold on to something and know that that feeling of it doesn't feel like it. You're not alone in that, right? That's half the battles that here in this podcast, here in this safe space, this is the reality of it. But I'm so thankful that at least we can air it out. We can have these conversations, because feeling like it's never going to get better in your head and saying it's never going to get better in your voice are two very different things. This is a lot worse.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we stay in touch with you? What are your social media handles?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn at Dr. Shahana Alibhai, actually, Dr. Shahana Alibhai. Come see me on my website. I've got an optimal health pyramid quiz that you can take and find out where your overall health is. My new book, Feel Better, which you talked about, releases September 26th. So all of this information and more, my personal journey, the journey of many of the youth that I work with, all those real stories are in the book. So it'll be available on Amazon or on my website, Dr. Shahana, for pre-order, and then Instagram at the Dr. Shahana. Come say hi to me there.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Dr. Shahana, you've been a pleasure to have as a guest today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for your transparency and sharing your stories about Pure OCD. That's been very informative. So we appreciate you for coming on the show today.
Oh, I appreciate you for having this platform. It's helping a lot of people.
Thank you. And to all you resilient minds out there, until next time, please subscribe to us on all our platforms, and don't forget to rate the show and leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Also, join the community of Resilient Minds and sign up for our monthly newsletter at clearlyprofit.com. Be sure to grab a copy of my book, The Music of My Life, on all Amazon marketplaces to get to know me better. If you can think of one person that will receive value from today's show or connect with Dr. Shahana's testimonial, please share it with them. Feel free to take a screenshot of this week's episode of the podcast and tag us on Instagram. You can tag myself at Only Cleone or Resilient Minds 365, and today's guest at Dr. Shahana,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
the Dr. Shahana on Instagram. And remember, mental health is not a death sentence. Despite your illness, you can strive, thrive, and live a life of abundance. Until next time, I'm Clearly Crawford, and I'm signing off.